Hi there, I'm Anna at VSAC, and I'm here talking with Jeff Almgren about his career. So, Jeff, I'll have you start out by telling us what you do for work.
I am a pharmacist and have been a pharmacist for about 40 years, a little bit longer than that. People typically think of pharmacists as just individuals that put pills in bottles. Pharmacists do much more than that. Pharmacists work with a variety of individuals, patients, customers, clients. They work with doctors. They work with a variety of individuals in industry, for example. But we are the individuals that are responsible for your health and your health care. We look for medications to make sure that they're correct for you. We make sure that there aren't interactions with other medications that you might be on. We look for allergies. We do lots and lots and lots of things to make sure that you're safe. We follow all the regulatory guidelines from the state and federal levels. We work with a variety of ability groups, from people that don't have much more than a grade school education to individuals that have a PhD and far in excess of that. But pharmacists work at a variety of locations, and I worked in a hospital for 40 years.
That's great. Can you tell us a little bit more about your educational background and kind of how you came into this kind of work?
Pharmacists, well, let's go back and say, how did I come into this line of work? When I was a little kid in the 1950s, I used to go with my mom down to the Rexall drugstore. And there were two pharmacists. In those days, they were predominantly men. The field is much more diverse now. At least 50% of pharmacists are women now. We have individuals that are from a variety of diverse backgrounds as well. But I saw the two pharmacists at the Rexall drugstore. And every time I went in, I smelled this odd, interesting smell that I now correlate to medication, and it was called coal tar. Coal tar was a ointment that was used to put on psoriasis or eczema, that sort of stuff. But the whole pharmacy smelled like coal tar, and I found over time that was kind of intriguing to me. And I talked with those pharmacists as I grew up, and found that the work they did to be really, really intriguing and interesting. So I kind of moved away from that. I thought, well, maybe I'll become a doctor. Maybe I'll go into medicine. And I applied to medical school a couple of times. I think my heart just wasn't really in it. I got a degree in German studies. I took lots of science courses, chemistry, math, physics, biology. And then I traveled. I spent a lot of time in Europe, Africa, and I was in the Mideast, and I was in Israel, and I was working on a kibbutz, counting loads of manure. And one day I decided, I'm really tired of counting loads of manure. I went to the University of Washington in Seattle, and so I returned to Seattle, applied to pharmacy school because I was really interested in chemistry and people, and pharmacy is an intersection of those two disciplines. I applied to pharmacy school. So I already had a 4-year degree with all the science prerequisites. And then I applied to pharmacy school. Pharmacy is now a 4-year program. One receives a doctor of pharmacy degree after completing that program. And I launched into pharmacy.
That's great. Thanks. What are some of your favorite things about this kind of work?
Anna, I think one of my favorite things, one is working with people. I found that when I was at the University of Washington in science courses, I didn't want to spend the rest of my life working with test tubes and Bunsen burners and figuring chemical reactions out, but I wanted to work with people. And I think I think one thing that really intrigues me is working with a variety of different peoples. Also helping people understand their medications and how to take their medications. I think that's really something that has intrigued me my entire life. Having people tell you that I've talked with doctors, I've talked with nurses, but you were the first person that really helped me understand my medications. And I think that was really a great feedback for me. Also, to learn constantly. Pharmacy is a profession or an occupation that is constantly changing. There are new medications coming out all the time. Pharmaceutical companies, universities are developing new drugs, medications in ways that 20 and 30 years ago we could have only dreamed about. So it's really important to stay up with all the new medications in your profession. I can guarantee you there are dozens and dozens every year. And so the opportunity for lifelong learning and education is also, it's hard, but it also keeps you interested in your profession.
That's great. What are some of the things that you've found to be the most challenging about this work?
Well, I think just keeping up with all the new medications that are being developed and out into the marketplace. I think really important for individuals that are in pharmacy is to essentially be able to speak another language, and that's one of pharmacy. And that is lots of different names with a lot of the new biological medications. They have names that are, it seems like 3 feet long. And so that is a big challenge. Keeping up with all the new medications. What I always told my pharmacy students, I'm a professor at the University of Washington School of Pharmacy as well, is that you pick a couple of areas. You need to focus on those areas, especially. You have to be, I have a general knowledge base, but really important for you to pick out a couple of areas and concentrate on those. And that's really challenging. That's really difficult to do that with. And I think one other really challenging aspect of pharmacy is that you work with a variety of individuals with a variety of educational backgrounds. And as I mentioned earlier, you may have individuals that have not much more than an elementary or grade school understanding of life in general, or that's their educational background. And then you also work with individuals that have post-PhD educational backgrounds working in aspects of science that are even difficult for me to understand their niche areas, but you have to be able to speak with a wide variety of individuals. And that continues. That's always a challenge.
Great. Can you walk us through what a typical day at work might look like for you?
Well, that's interesting. It depends on the type of pharmacy you do. I think we need to step back and say that as a pharmacist, you might work in the community, you might work at CVS or Rite Aid, or if you're in the Pacific Northwest, you might work at Bartell's Pharmacy. Those are all community pharmacies where many people go to get a prescription from their doctor or their nurse practitioner or their pharmacist practitioner. So if one were in community pharmacy, for example, one would be at the work setting, probably at 8:30 or 9 in the morning. Your day oftentimes is generally an 8-hour day, but there are settings where you work 10 and 12-hour shifts, and those can be particularly grueling. But when you arrive in the pharmacy, oftentimes you have an answering machine, for example, or you may need to check your emails for patients that might have questions over the previous night or are reordering medications. You would likely have several technicians that work with you. And if you're lucky, you might have several other pharmacists that you're part of a team with who could also share some of those aspects. And when your community pharmacy opens up at 9 or 10 in the morning, then you have clients or customers or patients that stream through the door with new prescriptions. And your day typically would be working with individuals bringing in prescriptions from their doctors. You're also an arbiter of insurance plans. And I spent most of my career in hospital pharmacy because I found working with insurance plans not to be my favorite task, although some individuals really like it. It's like a chess game. You work with insurance companies to get the best medications at the best price for their patients. And throughout the day, you will work with your technicians, who are generally the ones that put pills in bottles and put labels on ointment tubes. But you, as the supervising pharmacist, are responsible for checking all their work. So telephone calls, lots of phone calls, checking lots of emails, working again with insurance, a big part of what you do. And depending upon the type of pharmacy, you could work at a Kroger type pharmacy. They might fill several hundred prescriptions a day, which would be a very busy day. Or they might fill 400 or 500 prescriptions a day, in which case it's a challenge to get your lunch or your a break to just catch your breath or use the bathroom. Now, I worked in a hospital at a Veterans Affairs hospital for almost 35 years, or a little over 35 years. And I was a clinical pharmacy specialist. I worked with patients who needed a bone marrow or a stem cell transplant. We were affiliated with the Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center in Seattle, Washington, which is one of the world's most regarded research and clinical centers for bone marrow and stem cell transplants. So I worked on research protocols. I worked in new drug development from pharmaceutical companies. I worked with lots of individuals who were professors of medicine at the University of Washington School of Medicine. And my typical day was very atypical. I never knew what was coming down the pike. And that was one thing that I found most interesting about that type of job. My days were typically 10 or 12-hour days. And it's sometimes difficult to balance family and work life with those kinds of work. But I found that incredibly rewarding. As a professor of pharmacy at the University of Washington, I also had doctoral and postdoctoral students that I worked with every single day and educated. I educated medical trainees, fellows as well. And then, of course, I went to administrative meetings. I worked with our nursing staff to coordinate pharmacy responsibilities. And then I worked with patients all the time, educating them on their medications, making sure that they weren't having drug or medication interactions. And if they did, talking with doctors and nurses to work on that. And that was, that's how I spent almost 40 years. So there you go.
That's great. Thanks. What do you think would make someone a good fit for this kind of work?
An individual who really realizes the importance of details, realizing the importance of a decimal point, that if you move a decimal point one way or the other, people could die. So it's really important to have someone that can pay attention to detail, but can also see the broad picture. That's a really important aspect of pharmacy. I think individuals that are intrigued with chemistry, with math, science in general, but they also have to be able to talk to people. And they need to be able to talk to people, as I've mentioned earlier, who have very minimal educational background, to individuals that are very sophisticated and have been in academic studies all their life. So those, I think those are aspects of the individual that would do really well in pharmacy, but really have a love of working with people. I think that's absolutely crucial.
That's great. If a student is interested in this kind of work, is there anything that you would recommend that they do now to start exploring it, like classes or volunteer work or projects at home or part-time jobs or anything like that?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's really crucial to launching oneself into the profession. As I mentioned earlier, I think it's important to be able to be good at chemistry, to be comfortable with mathematics, and to have a love of science. So if one has those attributes, then I think it's a good path to look for volunteer opportunities. You can go down to your local pharmacy. Again, as I mentioned, CVS. It could be what we call a mom and pop's pharmacy. It could be Anna's pharmacy. It could be Joe's pharmacy. And talk with the pharmacist. Make an appointment to go in and talk with them a little bit about the profession, what they like, what really appeals to them, if there are any turnoffs, how you can work around those. But volunteer work initially, and then oftentimes that pharmacy will find that you're a good fit for them, and they might have you work as a technician, for example. And in some states, it's a requirement that you receive a certificate, not a certificate, but you need to register with the State Board of Pharmacy as what we call a technician, for example. There are other areas where you can volunteer, including hospitals. That's a great opportunity. In our COVID era, currently, sometimes that's a bit more of a, can be a little bit more of a challenge, but this is not going to last forever. So I think it's important that one puts oneself into those settings where medications are being used. You can go to nursing homes or skilled nursing facilities, or we call them SNFs, where you can work in a setting where medications are being utilized every day. And again, you have to find or make sure that there are safe opportunities for you to volunteer. Industry hires a variety of individuals, and oftentimes there are summer jobs that become available with pharmaceutical companies, for example, or pharmacy related area. So step one, seek those out, volunteer yourself. And if you can get paid for the same work, that's even better. But I think those are good places to start. And then I would encourage individuals that are really interested in pharmacy to look for a job as a pharmacy technician, for example. And then you really find out what happens on an hourly basis in pharmacy. And if that continues to be appealing to you, then you're headed in the right direction.
That's great. And you spoke a little bit already about the educational requirements, but what kind of education or training would someone be thinking about down the road if this is the kind of career that they'd want to go into?
Yeah, I think if you graduate from high school and you've had some science courses, that's beneficial. If you had chemistry, if you've taken math, if you've taken biology, for example. Moving on to the collegiate level, you can start at the community college level. I was on the admissions committee for the University of Washington School of Pharmacy in Seattle for many years. And we had many excellent pharmacists, or pharmacist candidates who had gone to community college or 2-year program. So it's a great place to get your math, your chemistry, your biology background, and it's the prices there for tuition are much more affordable than at four-year schools.
Mhm.
Alternatively, you can go to a four-year school. I encourage individuals to go to state schools.
Mhm.
They tend to be more financially doable.
Mhm.
Um, but once one gets to the collegiate level, important to have a year of inorganic chemistry, a year of organic chemistry, math courses. Some pharmacy schools require calculus. So I took calculus as
Yeah.
well. Physics is a good choice. But I think what one needs to do is look at schools of pharmacy and find out what their requirements
Mhm.
are for applicants for School of Pharmacy. And those the coursework that I told you is important. Get good grades.
Mhm.
Pharmacy is a very competitive program. There are state schools and private schools that abound, usually 2 or 3 per state. Um, but really important to get good grades. I would say, a 3.5 or better is pretty
Mhm.
important. If you have a grade point much less than 3.0 on a 4-point scale, it's going to be very difficult for you to be, for an individual to be competitive applying to pharmacy. But study hard, and you'll be on the gates for applying to pharmacy school. Pharmacy programs are 4 years, 4 professional years. You graduate with a doctor of pharmacy, or what we call a PharmD degree. Some people oftentimes think it's a PhD, but it's what we call a clinical practice degree, PharmD degree. And then also many state boards of pharmacy, for an individual to become licensed, are required to complete intern hours. And those are oftentimes in the neighborhood of 2,000 to 2,500 hours.
Mhm.
And that translates into about a year of 8-hour a day work as a pharmacy intern. And those hours oftentimes can be completed concurrent with your 4-year PharmD program. And then you graduate with your 4-year PharmD.
Hmm. That's great. Thanks. Anything else you would want to share with students about this work?
I loved pharmacy.
Mhm.
I still love pharmacy. I've been doing it since the mid 1970s. As I said, my first acquaintance with pharmacy was in the 1950s. So that's a long time ago. I oftentimes thought I couldn't believe that I got paid to do what I did every single day, because I really love the practice of pharmacy. It's the junction of biologicals and medications
Mhm.
that work in an individual to make their life um, much more um, uh, uh, doable for individuals that have Medicaid, or uh, that have health problems, for example,
Mhm.
to have individuals be educated about proper use of their medications. I think it's really important for individuals to have a passion for this. I saw individuals that would come to work every day, and we'd have to shoehorn them out of work
Mhm.
at the end of 10 hours, for example, because they loved it that much. Or alternatively, there were individuals that just came and went through
Mhm.
8 hours, and while they were good pharmacists, it wasn't their life's passion. So
Mhm.
I think also important to look at programs that are available. I really encourage individuals to look at their state schools. They're
Mhm.
much more affordable than private 4-year programs. One can go to state school, for example, and have 4 years of tuition be in the area of maybe $50,000 to $75,000. And if one goes to a private pharmacy school, one can have debt in excess of $200,000 to $250,000. So I think it's really important to apply to a variety of schools and look at your financial situation and make sure that you optimize that. But I really encourage individuals to go online for wherever you are. Look at your state schools, look at private schools, look at schools on the East Coast, the Midwest, and the West Coast. Different parts of the United States tend to be to have differing laws about how active you can be as a pharmacy practitioner. And then last but not least, pharmacy positions can be in the community, as we said, at CVS, for example. You can work in hospitals. You can work as a consultant in, say, skilled nursing facilities. You can work for the government in a variety of areas. In regulation, the Food and Drug Administration has great positions. You can go into the military with pharmacy and travel around the world. And I had friends that were in the Navy, were in the Army, that were in the Air Force as pharmacists. So pharmacy also, there are pharmacists that work in industrial settings, for example, and factories, plants, Amazon, warehouses, where they're called upon to help employees as well. So pharmacists work in just a myriad of settings, and I think it's important to understand and realize that they do more than simply put a pill in a bottle at a CVS or a Rite Aid pharmacy. So if you're interested in pharmacy, go out and Google it and find your passion.
That's great. Well, thank you so much, Jeff.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.